Welcome, everybody, to Legal Tech Week for November 1st, 2024. Down to the wire on the voting. And yes, you're thinking of Startup Alley, I'm sure, but there's some other voting going on too, I think, over the next couple of weeks. Anyway, this is the show where we talk about the top stories in legal tech and innovation from the past week. And before we get to any of that, let's go around and introduce our panelists. I was thinking while you introduce yourself, you could tell me, like, what did you do for Halloween, if anything? Victor, how about you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Victor Lee. I am Assistant Managing Editor for the ABA Journal. If Halloween, my wife took my son out trick-or-treating, and I stayed at home to pass out candy to the kids. Um, so yeah, pretty boring. My son went as Captain America, even though he's actually he's never seen like a Captain America cartoon or anything like that. It's just he thought the shield was cool. So which it is, I'm not gonna deny that.
I love it. You have to send pictures around. Nikki, how about you?
My name is Nikki Black. I am the oh God, I was trying to remember what I was doing. Now I've forgotten my title. I'm the principal Bill Insight Strategist.
You had a very good Halloween, I'm taking it.
No, I didn't. And I write legal tech columns for ABA Journal of Law Daily Record. And because my husband is a nurse, he worked until 8. He was working yesterday. And because we have the puppy and the 2 dogs, I just didn't want to deal with it this year. So for the first year in probably 20 years, I went dark and I hid in the house and didn't answer the doorbell. And so, because it was too much, I was a little overwhelmed by the idea of the puppy and the dogs barking. And so, and I'm a little embarrassed because our neighborhood's a big trick-or-treating neighborhood. And I don't know, I like everyone's always active. When my kids were little, it was great. So I feel kind of bad. I'm a little guilty, a little guilt-ridden.
Yeah, all right.
But
Stephanie, how about you?
Hi, I am, yeah, who I am first. I was just going to start talking about Halloween. I was just going to go right into Halloween. I love Halloween. I'm Stephanie Wilkins. I am the Director of Content at Legal Tech Hub. And last night, I actually marched with the group in the big East Village Halloween parade. It's like the really big one in New York City. I think this was the 51st year they had it. Yeah, we were with a group and joined us. There's an official group called Witches Vote. So that was fun. Yeah, it was great.
That is awesome. And Joe.
Yeah, I'm Joe Patrice from Above Law. And thinking like a lawyer. I went to I went to the mall around here. They had like a candy giveaway and like parade little kids and stuff. So I watched that.
All right. Went to the mall. Okay. And I was sort of, well, maybe a little bit with Nikki, and I didn't quite hide. We didn't hide at all. But we have a very long driveway, and on a street where nobody has a long driveway, and so kids are like, for some reason, I don't know what it is. So I went out and like hung a bunch of lights along my driveway, hoping it would entice people to come down. And I think we had all of one trick-or-treater come to our house, so we have a lot of leftover candy sitting around. But I was thinking about it this morning because this is, I think I've talked about it on the show before, but in doing my genealogical research, I discovered that I am my eighth great grandmother was one of the 8 women killed as a Salem witch. And one couple of years ago, I wrote a post about that fact. But I was thinking about how weird it is that we've turned all this celebration and holiday around basically the cold-blooded murders of 8 women who were entirely innocent. And Salem is like, probably the craziest place in the United States and in Massachusetts.
So you
But
say.
well, the evidence was a little scant, I would say. I don't think it would work by today's standards.
What was it? It was like they would throw you in the river, and then if you drowned, then you were innocent, and then if you floated, you were a witch or something like that.
That's the Monty Python
yeah,
approach,
that's
isn't
from
it?
Monty Python. That's one of my
Well, no,
favorite movie
well,
scenes
that's
ever.
what. Well, I mean, if they weigh the same as a duck.
Avoid as much of a duck, yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Therefore, she's a witch, ban her. That's one of my favorite scenes. Because
Yeah.
it's like so, there's something about that, just the mob mentality. That and the same one from the monorail from The Simpsons. It's like examples of the mob mentality just gone awry. It's funny.
Yes. Which is a good reminder to everybody watching the show to get out and vote next week. Speaking of mob mentality.
So I wish I early voted because I'll be on vacation next week. But if you actually did early voting on Halloween in New York City, they had like Halloween themed early voting stickers with like pumpkins on them. I should have
Oh.
waited.
I think I saw somebody post one of those to social media.
Yeah.
Cool idea.
All right, well, we've got stories to talk about here other than Halloween and voting. But before we do that, I am going to take my moderator's prerogative to point out to people watching the show, if they haven't seen it already, that I've posted the call for entries for the 9th annual Startup Alley at ABA Tech Show. It's here, I'll put it in the chat too, but we are looking for trying to get a lot of applicants this year. And the Startup Alley has become kind of the seminal opening night event at ABA Tech Show. Sometimes we're lucky Stephanie serves as our timekeeper for the event. And it's a great opportunity for startups to get noticed and get seen and get in front of a good audience. One of the things we're trying to do, I don't know if people remembered last year, we had this kind of anomaly where all of the finalists, the 15 finalists who made it up on stage, happened to be represented by white guys. I think maybe they weren't all white, mostly all white guys. No women up on stage, and mostly all white guys. And that's really the first time that's ever happened. And in fact, we've actually had a lot of diversity in the winners at Startup Alley, not just the people who presented, but in the actual finalists and winners. One of the things I did this year is I went and reached out to kind of some of the past winners and tried to get input from them or ideas from them about how we can do a better job of ensuring diversity among the participants in the Startup Alley. We were thinking about maybe adding a category for a diverse founder or adding different questions in the form. And most people seem to think that was not a good idea, that we shouldn't have sort of a category for women or a category for people of color. And they thought it was really a funnel issue. We really want to try and get the word out as much as possible and get it out to as many groups and whatever. So hopefully any of you watching or listening the show today will, not just tell startups, but if you're involved in any organizations that may be working with startups or anything like that, if you can help get the word out, appreciate it, and try and get more and more applications in. And on that, what's a good story?
Can I add something else on ABA Tech?
Yeah.
So since Steve is not here, this is sort of a PSA because we figured out today that some people have been getting an email claiming to be hotels with discounts for ABA Tech Show, and it is phishing. It is not from the ABA.
Really?
It will have a bunch of hotels that are like a mile away from McCormick Place or whatever. And I forwarded it to Steve because it came to some like general info email at LTH. And everyone's like, I don't know about that. So I sent it to him and he's like, no, that's not from us. That's the discount code in it is not our discount code. So
that's interesting.
Word to the wise.
Wow.
That's strange. It's not even that large of a conference, all things considered, to be expending that effort, I guess, on it.
Yeah. And the idea that any hotel would cut its price around the time of Tech Show is absolutely ludicrous. Obviously, they're going to raise their prices.
Yeah. But anyway, so it was just a weird thing that came up today. So I thought I would share it.
Yeah. All right. Well, since we started on a price topic, how about we kick off with the $2,000 paralegal?
Sure. So a lot of people shared this around over the last few days. OpenAI's CFO talked about how, gushed about their new product because their new model, they had some lawyers working with it and said of what it could do. They asked the lawyers, how much would you pay a paralegal to do that? And they were like, oh, easily $2,000 an hour, which raised a bunch of us started wondering, where are these $2,000 paralegals coming from? Inflation had a spell about a year ago, but I don't think it was quite that bad. And I definitely, so being generous, we could say that they were talking about associates, but even at that point, $2,000 an associate is a bit extreme, I think. at least to the extent that that associate would be doing entry-level tasks. Like there might be seventh years you're billing out at 1,000, but probably not first and second, or 2,000. I mean, but probably not first and second. So this all got me thinking, like, what's going on here? Like, if these folks don't quite understand the model, that bodes poorly for them. And I also then started having some musings about the business model as a whole. And yes, this eventually gets to the point we talked about the other day about the billable hour. But even before that, it got me thinking, if the people, I don't think that the legal vendors working with AI are under this illusion by any stretch. But the people really making AI, the guts, if they don't understand how this argument would cut the exact opposite way for legal adoption, right? If you really were saying that what you did with your product is remove $2,000 worth of billing, that is probably not going to result in a lot of adoption amongst lawyers, because and I went through kind of the numbers in my article about it. It's just like if you take the kind of the billable hour model and truly respect it, you would say that you would get rid of that $2,000 an hour paralegal if the amount of savings you get in work effort leads you to be able to eliminate them as a full-time employee, therefore recouping costs you would spend on them, and that being somehow less than the amount of money you are getting from the work that they bill out over the course of a whole year. But that's almost never going to be the case because there's going to be human tasks that you're going to need some paralegal to do for some reason. So now you're still retaining the full-time employee, but getting less money for them. If anything, you would want to argue that it's replacing lower billed amounts, which then means that you're saving on that, and then for the full-time employee, maybe you could get somebody cheaper for that. But like, it all kept coming back to me that, and this gets back to what the billable hour point, it kept coming back. This is why, if there's any truth to any of these ideas, that it substantially decreases the amount of time that it takes to do certain tasks. It requires a refocusing on what are we doing? Are we selling hours, or are we selling value by which hours are a approximate of that value? And if that's the case, you're going to have to find a way to recoup that value. And either you start billing $2,000 an hour for paralegals for the little tasks that are left over after AI, or you start some kind of a hybrid billing. And that was kind of my whole take on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, when I first saw the story, well, first I read the headline, I was just like, oh, someone probably just misspoke, or it was a mistake, or just a little slip up. Because I mean, well, I think 10 years ago, when I was still at ALM, we reported that Ted Olson was billing like 1,800 an hour, and people were stunned. So it's like, I assume he's probably up past 2,000 by now. But so it's like, so like, if you have a paralegal that's on par with Ted Olson's skills, and it's like, all right, I guess that's worth $2,000 an hour. But then you wonder why they didn't just go to law school and make it official then. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like to think it was more just somebody talking out of their butt and not knowing, or just maybe just like kind of, I mean, sometimes, we talk and we kind of get mixed up on things, and something, maybe a number just kind of like maybe she got confused on a number, and, something flipped. Cause it's like, I mean, just for anybody, this $2,000 an hour just doesn't pass the sniff test for a lot of people. I mean, I'm so, yeah, I was skeptical, but yeah, but to Joe's larger point, I mean, yeah, definitely, raises questions about the model in general. And it's nothing that we haven't talked about in depth, on this program and other venues. It's just, it just makes it just kind of underscores the, the sort of like the inefficiency of it all.
Yeah, I think the woman from OpenAI talking, like, not only did she not understand like law and paralegals and billable hours, but also like the way I heard it was, they did this thing in an hour. They would have normally spent $2,000 for a paralegal to do it in however long that took. And somehow that became like, oh, look, we would pay paralegals $2,000 an hour to do this, but we do it. And I'm like, none of it made sense. Like she like collapsed it all both parts of it down into an hour, and yeah, there are no paralegals. Most partners are not billing 2,000 an hour as far as I know. So
I think it makes more sense if you look at it from like a general counsel perspective, and maybe she just was interpreting it through the wrong lens, but maybe it was, if we outsource this, I mean, I'm adding a lot of additional facts here, but sent this to outside counsel, it would take them $2,000 an hour to deal with this, and it would only take us $50 internally, so we wouldn't even have to outsource it. I mean, that's the only way what she's saying would even make sense in terms of the context of how it would, they're not operating in a billable hour like a general counsel inside of a company, right? And so in that situation, it would make sense. But it also, from a very different perspective, was a great lesson for people in PR, like in marketing, like prepping your executives, making sure their talking points make sense and they understand the concepts they're talking about. Like clearly something went awry here, and it was sort of a good lesson for that purpose as well. Coming from inside a tech company, you got to make sure your execs are fully prepared for whatever is going to come at them. That one seemed like it was a softball to her, though, didn't it? Like she knew it was coming.
yeah, I don't know. I think I don't think they thought. I don't think we were her target audience. I think her target audience was people who don't know anything about law, who would just be like, "Oh,
Yeah.
awesome."
Well, yeah, and I think that kind of gets to the disconnect, because I think they think that anytime they can save what somebody would spend, that's a good thing. And the problem is, in an industry like this one, what somebody would spend, it's all well and good to eliminate that, but if you eliminate that without recouping that cost to deal with the amount of cost you have by having that person as a full-time employee, you either need to get rid of that person if you can, which whatever, but if you can't, then you've just now set up a situation where it's a cost sink for the firm, which if that's the case, then that's going to be a problem for the firm's adoption.
So there was a sort of related legal tech story this week that I hadn't actually even thought about talking about today until we just started talking about this. But that was the Alt Legal acquisition. Now, Alt Legal, by the way, is a former Startup Alley winner, I'd like to point out. But Alt Legal, they're a trademark docketing service, and they've always just been a tech platform. They're not a services company anyway. But this week they acquired, or actually last week, they acquired a paralegal company, a company that provides paralegal services in trademark matters. And they said a lot of their customers had sort of been clamoring for access to paralegals as well as through the technology. But one of the things he said is that, even though they've acquired these people, this people company, their first thing they're going to be doing is looking at ways AI and other technologies can streamline the services that are being offered by paralegals so that they can reduce the number of human hours involved in paralegal work. And because they plan to do that, they're going to offer the services on basically a fixed fee subscription basis rather than some kind of an hourly basis. So, they're going to be using AI to try and streamline the kind of the scut work side of being a paralegal. Paralegals are a lot like lawyers. I mean, there's the scut work side and there's, the more intellectual side of the work they do. And so to the extent you can streamline that scut work stuff and then package it all up in a flat price, it seems like a really smart move on their part.
I assume the main market for that though would like not be big law, right? Because unless things have drastically changed since I was in it, there were very few paralegals doing anything much more than scut work. They would have sort of armies of them, and then there were the handful of senior paralegals who were, had been there longer than any of us and were far smarter than any of us. I mean, the other paralegals probably were too, but so I mean, I think to really recoup that difference of paralegal work, it has to be the places that really use paralegals in a valuable way, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know enough honestly about trademark practice to know what it is the paralegals are doing. So, but as it was explained to me by Nihal, the CEO at Alt Legal, there is kind of a mix of as I say, of routine and more intellectual work that they're doing. All right. Well, Stephanie, is this week, was this your first official column this week in your new job?
So I mean,
No, maybe.
the first official, it's the second one. The first one was
Okay.
just like, "Hi, I'm here." So I mean, really, kind of the first substantive
All
one.
right. I
Yeah.
can't
So
read them because I haven't signed up yet.
we're going to be changing the paywall structure. It's because the way it worked in the past, it was like, I mean, something was free until something new in that content series replaced it, and they were fewer and farther between. But now that I'm writing things like multiple times a week, it's shoving things behind a paywall in like 24 hours, which is not the intention. So that needs to be switched. And these will not always immediately be paywalled. But
All right.
every week on Tuesdays, I will be writing just a column that is kind of just picking up on one or two issues that have stuck out to me this week, and then I do a sort of little section of what I'm watching, with some of the more interesting announcements or whatever. I will also be doing other more in-depth pieces, but this will just be a running thing. And this week I talked about agents, because agents are everywhere now. It's like the hottest new buzzword. Like at Legal Geek a couple weeks ago, I feel like you walk around that vendor hall and everyone had an agent, and it's now becoming one of those things again, which happens like every time there's a new advancement of what do we really mean when we say agent. Not everybody even agrees on what they are. Some people are, is that really just like a chatbot dressed up in disguise and we're calling it an agent, or is it really agentic AI? But yeah, agents are everywhere now. And there were a couple, I mean, I know Luminance came out with Agent Lumi, which I just love that name. Spellbook has had them recently. Genie AI had their recent raise saying they're going to use it for agentic AI. But some of the most striking announcements in the agent space, I think, came more from bigger tech. So you had, like, Anthropic came out with their computer use product in beta, where basically they're gonna, like, the AI is gonna be able to take over and use your entire computer. And Google has said the same thing, and OpenAI said it a long time ago. So yeah, agent stuff is everywhere. We're gonna have to again sort through what really is and what isn't. Yes, that's exactly my point. Agent, Michelle said in the chat, agents have to have tools to be more than a chatbot. Yeah, I think some people are just trying to pass off like, oh, we have this really fancy chatbot, or like, and there's a lot of argument going on. I've had so many conversations with people in the last week or so on like, what actually constitutes an agent? How much reasoning does it have to do on its own? How extensive does its, resourcing and thought process have to be? And I mean, that's a much bigger thing to dig into, but agents, I feel like it's going to be the next big thing we're constantly hearing about. Like, next big vendor hall you go to, agents everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I'll back that. NetDocs, there was a lot of agentic language being tossed around, so that could be the coming prediction for next year, I suppose.
And then what's going to happen is people are going to start saying, doesn't matter if it's an agent or not. We just have software that provides you with what you need. Soon it's going to become the dirty word, like every other type of like cool tech.
Exactly. No, exactly. Because I mean, agentic AI is really cool and it has these really cool capabilities when it is legitimate, but it's not like an easy thing to just slap an agent into your product. But that's going to just be, yeah, it's going to be a whole journey we're on now, is my prediction.
Agent AI wouldn't be a bad title for like a TV show or like a movie. That wouldn't be bad. Maybe I'll steal that one.
Get writing.
For your screenplay.
Yeah. And if we're successful in taking the Legal Tech Week on the road as a kind of road show, then we'll all need agents of a different kind. Kind of picturing like Danny DeVito sitting behind a desk with a big cigar, negotiating a deal for us or something. But all right. whatever that was about. I don't know what I'm talking about.
What movie did you play an agent in?
I don't think he ever played an agent. I just like he looks to me like what I picture when I picture of like a classic old school, not even a Hollywood, more like a Broadway agent or something. I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe he did play an. He's played pretty much every role, so maybe he did play an agent. All right, Nikki, you want to take us to Surrogates Court?
Yeah, there's exciting things going on in surrogate court. It was just a New York case that caught my eye.
Actually, there's an AI to surrogate. Maybe there's some. We could have done some kind of a pun there had I thought about it.
Surrogate
I mean,
AI.
agent surrogate.
Um, but it just caught my eye basically because I think it's one of those holdings that's not going to withstand the test of time as it relates to sort of a knee-jerk reaction to tech. And basically, what was at issue was an expert was calculating damages, and they used Microsoft Copilot to check their work, apparently. And the judge said that the whole case was about whether output from generative AI is admissible in court and and what needs to be established before it's admitted. And I think the judge just went completely overboard. The judge said that due to the rapid evolution of AI and its inherent reliability issues, that you're going to need a Fry hearing, and the judge gets to determine the scope before the evidence is offered. Which, Fry hearings aren't, Fry hearings take up some time. And I thought what was more alarming was sort of the scope of the Fry hearing. Not only the scope of which should be determined by the court, but then he said in the instant case, the record's devoid of any evidence as to the reliability of Microsoft Copilot, let alone as it relates to how it was applied here. So, I just envision them trying to hold Fry hearings, trying to explain to the court how AI works and the coding behind it, and why hallucinations happen, and what a function is in Python. Like I can't imagine how the court thinks that they're going to be able to interpret, collect enough evidence, understand the evidence and the testimony in a way that they can actually render a decision about whether the AI is reliable in the context in which it was used or not. Like, I just think it's ridiculous for the court to say that. I think there should probably be some scrutiny at this point in time, because he's correct. It does sometimes hallucinate. But also in this case, the guy's checking his work. It's not like, it doesn't sound like he performed the math calculations, which is admittedly an area where sometimes generative AI has a problem doing simple math. But he was checking his work. And so that would imply that his work was solid in the first place. I just think it's kind of ridiculous, and it's one of those knee-jerk reactions. And as the judge acknowledges, the tech's evolving so quickly. I don't know what makes the judge think they're going to be able to keep up with that, be able to understand the testimony, since most of them in the Supreme Court and not the Supreme Court, but the congressman couldn't even understand what TikTok was. I don't think judges are going to be much more better prepared to deal with coding behind generative AI. So it's definitely not going to withstand the test of time. And I think a Fry hearing is really extreme, in my opinion. I don't know what you guys think.
Well, Microsoft also just rolled out the ability to now build agents in Copilot. So we don't have to worry about any of this anymore. It will all just do it for you.
But yeah, it seemed to me that the expert had come up with his or her opinion. I don't know whether it was a him or her, but it had come up with an opinion. And like I said, it was basically kind of just fact checking using the AI, and almost using it like a calculator, the way I read it. I mean, kind of just checking some of the numbers and calculations. And it seemed that the basis of the expert's opinion was not the AI. The AI was more a tool to just to do a kind of a final check before submitting the document to the court or wherever. So it did seem off base to me from what I read about it. I didn't dive into it deeply, so I may be missing some nuance there. But if they were somehow using the generative AI, I mean, solely coming to their opinion using the generative AI in some way, well, then I can see maybe you want to get into a little bit more scientific analysis of what's going on there. But to say I'm using it as a backup to check my work, it just didn't make sense.
Well, and to be fair to the judge, the evidence showed that
Wait a minute, we're trying to trash the judge here.
but it said that the expert couldn't provide the input or prompt used and couldn't advise regarding the sources relied upon for the output. And then this is the process used by the chatbot. That I think is the problem. But I do think that if someone's going to use, I mean, maybe the lesson to be learned is if you're going to, at the very least, use generative AI to check your work or to somehow help you come to a conclusion, that you should keep track of your work and keep notes as to the process and the prompts, at least for now, But I also don't think, I thought it was interesting you brought up a calculator because I thought the same thing. Was there a point in time where when calculators were used that they made people talk about the technology behind calculators? And I also think it's interesting, as an aside, that with breathalyzers and how there are so many issues with the programming behind breathalyzers, often those requests by defense counsel to understand the programming and the technology behind those tools are often denied. You don't need to know that, they just work and it's fine. So in that context, forget about it. Let's forget about constitutional rights and try and understand where this evidence is coming from. But in this context, that it seems to be super important, especially because it's a knee-jerk reaction to new tech.
I mean, I just think it's confusing because it's like here we are week in and week out, we talk about how it's important for you to check everything before especially if you use AI, then you should check it over before you submit it. Now it's like, okay, well, this person used AI to check it, and it's like that's not okay either. So it's like, well, okay, then what should they be doing then?
Yeah, but that's a little different. He wasn't checking the work that the AI produced. He was checking his own, using the AI.
Yeah,
to
using the check as well.
A little different than what's happening in other cases. But well, I actually have a judges doing the right thing with AI story. I think, in a sense that I don't think we talked about this before, but I had a post this week on kind of an odd coincidence in the sense that two state Supreme Courts this week, within a day of each other, put out orders relating in some way to the use of generative AI in the courts. One of them was really just a follow-up to an early order appointing a committee to study the issue. That was in Georgia. But the interesting one I thought was the Delaware Supreme Court, which put out this policy this week on the use of generative AI by court officials. And by judges or clerks or administrators or anybody else. And it seemed to me to be eminently reasonable, which is always surprising to me when that happens with a court. But I mean, the basic policy says go ahead and use it. Now they do talk about approved Gen AI. So apparently there is some kind of a process by which the court administrative office of the court in Delaware would have to approve the Gen AI tool. And that this order doesn't seem to specify what that process is. But with regard to Gen AI, approved Gen AI, then they're free to use it. And really the only real caveat comes down to that issue of checking the work. I mean, it basically probably the key point. There's only 5 points here in the whole order, but the key point is users may not delegate their decision-making function to approve Gen AI. Or it also says that any use of Gen AI output is ultimately the responsibility of the authorized user. Authorized users are responsible to ensure the accuracy of all work product and must use caution when relying on the output of Gen AI. So, I mean, it strikes me that's a somewhat liberal approach for a court to take. Say, go ahead and use it. Just remember, you're responsible, and you need to check the work you do. So, good for Delaware. I think we talked about last week that there was a judge at the conference I was at last week that was quite open about the fact that she's using generative AI to help draft her opinions, and it makes a lot of sense for judges to use this for in certain areas, such as summarizing facts and summarizing arguments and that sort of thing. So good for them.
Well, and it definitely mirrors a lot of typical organizational policies about generative AI use within the company or organization. A lot of them sort of have that same framework. So it makes sense that the courts would want to allow their employees to use it because oftentimes they tend to be somewhat underfunded, they're overworked, especially depending on the court that they're assigned to. But sometimes those courts are so busy and they'll have like a clerk or a part-time clerk So it makes a lot of sense that they would want to expedite a lot of that routine work and outsource it to a generative AI tool. But I agree that on its face, it seems like, oh, it seems like a really reasonable, normal thing to be doing, but it's surprising to see the courts doing it and being so open about it, but that's often I wonder if it almost strikes me as something that you just see general counsel creating. Like, I don't know who's responsible for that within the court system, but definitely seemed like it had a lawyer who'd already dove into all this, which is most likely the case, who was, crafted it, but.
Yeah, I think actually it was another committee. I think they had a committee that studied it and made a recommendation on it.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure of that.
I bet they just had ChatGPT create the policy.
Quite possibly, yeah. All right, well,
Well, I mean, well, sort of the last point about that. I mean, it's Delaware, right? I mean, because they probably figure, a lot of the clients that are going to be in court there are pretty sophisticated. They're pretty well-heeled, chancery courts and whatnot. They probably figure, the lawyers that are practicing there on a normal basis are probably not going to be the type of like sloppy lawyers who rely on this tool to like take shortcuts and whatnot. Obviously, exceptions everywhere, but maybe they just figure, okay, well, we'll just spell it out for them, and then that'll be good enough.
yeah. The state that doesn't allow any lawyers from other states to practice there. So they've got it all sewn up there. Well, you can do pro hac vice, right? But you have to do it. You have to have a local counsel on every matter. You have to always have local counsel.
It's a good business
all
model.
right. Yeah, it works. Victor, you've got maybe a little more tragic Gen AI story this week. You're muted.
Sorry, yeah. Yeah, so there was a lawsuit that was filed, it was reported on late last week. So I actually wasn't sure if you guys talked about it last week or not, but I looked at the log. I don't think you guys did. There's a chatbot, I guess it's called Daenerys, named after the Game of Thrones character. So maybe that's the first clue. But although she didn't die by suicide. But basically, there was a teenage son who was using it and got addicted to it and killed himself. And the parents are suing because they claim that this chatbot like kind of enticed him to do it. And it reminded me of I don't know if people remember this, like back in the 80s when I think Ozzy Osbourne and Judas Priest got sued for allegedly having subliminal lyrics in their songs telling people listeners to kill themselves. So it reminded me of that a little bit, sort of like this idea of, okay, well, it's more of a product liability thing rather than a speech thing or anything like that. But yeah, it's just again, I mean, obviously, we know it's a different type of product. This is much more addictive and much more potentially harmful than music, I guess. But like I thought it was an interesting lawsuit, just sort of kind of the argument is that they didn't have guardrails in place, they didn't have any kind of restrictions in place. And I mean, I don't even know if like the chatbot even like was saying, hey, you should do this. It was probably more, I think it was allegedly was like, oh, let's come to me as soon as possible. And I think he took it a certain way. So obviously there are a lot of extenuating circumstances here that don't necessarily that doesn't make it necessarily a straightforward matter. But I thought it was a novel theory, just sort of this idea of the harm that these things are capable of, and the influence that they can exert on somebody, especially if they're already struggling with these kind of issues.
Yeah, definitely a novel case.
There was also weird. There was like a Belgian man in 2023 that got really, really into this chatbot, and he was like getting really anxious about climate change and eco disaster. And apparently, this chatbot suggested that he sacrifice himself to fix climate change, and he did. So that was a Belgian suicide case. Yeah.
I think it's
And there was Kevin Roos of the New York Times that who chatbot told him to leave his wife. He did not leave his wife, though.
Oh yeah, there was that. Yeah, that's right.
Well, and I think it's evidence of a larger societal problem a tangential issue that I was reading about today was online scams and how they tend to target boomers who are like divorced or whatever, and it's like these fake romances. They make them think they're in a romance with some random fake beautiful woman, and they give her all their money because she has some bump in the road, either a hurdle to get into the country or else she has some personal tragedy that strikes. And now the parents, it was a New York Times article, are constantly, kids are constantly trying to get their parents to snap out of it. But part of what it is they're just lonely and they cling to this, like this, they were talking about the psychology of it, cling to this idea of this woman who's interested in them, or man, because women are also falling victim to it. But at the end of the day, it's sort of this loneliness, and that the pandemic the isolation of the pandemic kind of exacerbated it and made people even more vulnerable. And it's the same thing that's driving this, people becoming entangled with chatbots, right? Like one thing I do typically, sometimes like it's autistic people or other people that have challenges with interacting with other people. And so these chatbots are more predictable. They say what you want them to say. I mean, that's kind of what they're programmed to do. And people will get personally entangled and feel like this chatbot understands them more than anybody else. And they have a hard time making these external connections. And so it's almost like there's multiple symptoms of this happening throughout. It's like a societal problem. And it's a systemic societal problem that's popping up in all these different ways. And this is one of them. And it's unfortunate that the chatbot programming can sometimes take people down these sort of dark pathways, especially when they're really vulnerable people that will fall prey to it. So it was a really sad story, especially since it was this young kid. I mean, in some ways you feel like this 75-year-old guy, like, come on, you really think this like 25-year-old woman is into you, who's like stunningly beautiful, and you've lived a long life and you have the wherewithal, versus this 14-year-old kid who, you know, is barely. It's kind of sad.
So that is Bill Belichick erasure that I'm not willing to allow. We've gotta respect Bill's. If anyone's following that, he is the exact description that you just described, and he is dating a 23-year-old, but at 70, whatever he is. But yes, no, you're very right. I just had to throw in the Bill thing. Anybody see his pictures? He just posted pictures of him and his girlfriend for Halloween. I was like, it's very clever.
Who is he? I don't.
He's
the Patriots, former Patriots coach. Yeah.
Oh.
He probably has all of her like.
It's sports. Okay. All right.
He probably has cameras everywhere and has like, you know, her phone's tapped and everything. I mean, he's probably already inside that head. He knows how to exploit it.
Well, they had cameras at that establishment he was visiting in Florida, didn't they? That we never got to see those videos though.
No, that was Kraft, right?
No, that was Kraft.
Oh, that was Kraft.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
whoo,
Yeah.
got myself in trouble there. Don't sue me for libel, Belichick. One Boston coaches.
That's different though, at least because this is like a semi-famous person who probably has some, is financially stable. I mean, and that's the fact that he's dating young women could be believable, right? Like, and she may be interested in him. These other people are like some old guy who's, one of them I read, and there was in the New York Times, was he was this much older man who one of their kids died when he was young, and then his wife died, and he's just, or else he got divorced, I can't remember which, and he's like all alone, and he's 70 something, and you know, the fact that he's like, oh yeah, this 20-something-year-old beautiful woman in wrestling, she's some famous wrestler, I don't know, is into me, and I'm in a very serious relationship with her. Like I just like that they become deluded.
Even though his son was telling him this is not real, Dad, and he gave away $1 million to this woman basically.
Yeah,
and,
that's the article.
Yeah, I read that article. You know, the other thing that article made. Well, first of all, I would point out what Danielle had mentioned in the chat, which is on Victor's story, having the guns in the house is another issue that apart from the chat. But on the story from the New York Times, one of the things I was thinking about is when is there going to be a lawsuit just over the sort of addictive quality of some of these, maybe there has been, of some of these applications, and particularly the way they affect older people, because I know a number of older people who live their lives staring at their phone all day, playing with games and Facebook and videos and TikTok, and who, because of that, get lured into not $1 million scams, but all these sort of like small dollar scams, like click here, and you don't know that you're authorizing some subscription that you then can have no idea how to get out of that subscription. And pretty soon you're racking up hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a month and stuff you don't even know you're paying for probably, until your bank statement comes or something. And this somehow there's got to be more a higher degree of first, responsibility, sure, among family members and whatever else, but also just among these vendors. There's got to be some way to hold some of these companies accountable for the fact that they just want to suck people into buying their thing and they don't care who it is or how they get them. And it's a really weird state of affairs right now, I think.
Yeah, I don't know about anything on the adult front, but I mean, there are so many lawsuits now against TikTok and the other social media people on behalf of schools about how it's addictive and harming children. So, I mean, that could be a good first precedent to at least even see how those sort of claims play out. Obviously, the considerations are different
Yeah.
between, the behavior targeting the senior citizens necessarily and maybe the kids, but I mean, the underlying premise I see as very similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always skeptical of going after technology for scams. Like the scam behavior is already criminalized. The fact that they've developed a new vector for it, I am reticent to make it a vector determined thing. Like continue to punish people for the crime itself.
Yeah, but these like sites and platforms just supercharge it, right? I mean, it's just like the algorithms are
Sure.
designed to like reinforce like whatever you're watching. So if you're watching some QAnon video, or not to pick on one side, but like if you're watching some kind of like conspiracy theory video, whatever, it's then once you're done with it, it's going to give you like 5 or 6 more that are probably even worse, and it's just then you get sucked in, and it's just like I don't think we've had something like that where it would just magnify things like that to the
Well,
point
True.
that
True, and there's some damage that can be caused on the like getting you into conspiracies, but for the scam like behavior, the like pig butchering that Niki's talking about, I and with that, we have the other issue, which is most of that stuff is coming from overseas and outside of our jurisdictions anyway. But generally speaking, I get nervous when we start going after the tech vector rather than the behavior. Like we didn't need to ban phones when phones got invented and people started scamming you over the phone, right? Like we can find answers to criminality without going after the tech itself.
I
well,
do think it's interesting. Sorry, Nikki, though. I mean, it depends on, in certain cases, like at what point are the actors being malicious, though? I mean, like, have you ever watched The Social Dilemma? It was from 2020 on Netflix, and it will not to be confused with The Social Network, which is an amazing movie. Um, it will make you want to bury your phone in the ground for like 3 days and never touch it. But it really is where like they purposely like to tie it to revenue and things like that. Like they watch and manipulate the algorithm intentionally to feed you more of that stuff for those purposes. So I think that is where it's not just, I normally am with you, is like don't blame the tech, but when people are intentionally trying to manipulate the tech to do some of these things, I think that's not as clear cut.
well, and what these platforms do is the algorithm is designed to make you feel intense feelings, because the more intense your feelings are while you're on it, often anger, the longer that you view those videos. And so that's one of the reasons I deleted TikTok was I know what I want to see on social media. And I think I've said this before, like I would watch TikTok and I would leave so pissed off at my husband who had just been sitting on the couch like minding his own business, but I would get fed all these like videos about how your husband's an asshole or my husband did this. I'm like, my husband did that too, and I would get so mad. And like, and most of the time he hadn't done anything in years, but it reminded me of something he did that made me mad a long time ago, and it just kept feeding me those. And and it was because it made me angry and it made me stay on there longer. And I could tell I was being manipulated, but I've got enough wherewithal to kind of understand that because I know what I like to see. I choose my RSS feed and I spend a lot of time on there, and there's nothing like your husband's an asshole on my RSS feed. You know what I mean? So, and that's why I also like LinkedIn, because thus far you're getting stuff from people in your network and everything else. This is the other thing I wanted to mention. Like, Facebook is becoming a cesspool of AI generated content. And so far LinkedIn is, people use posts and stuff, but you're not getting patently false stuff for the most part on LinkedIn yet. But that AI generated content makes it so much harder for anybody to discern reality from fiction, to know whether the person you're talking to is real, and it's really believable. And the more that sophisticated AI gets, the more challenging it's going to be to actually decipher reality from fiction. And the easier it is, it's going to be to get sucked into these schemes. So I do think that as the tech improves, the burden is going to be on these tech companies to somehow be able to screen this, to give people advisories, this might be a bot you're talking to, you know what I mean? Or this is a person, this person says, this is person's coming at you from overseas. You may not realize that. I don't know what it looks like, but there should be maybe some type of warning or some type of controls. Or maybe you can set up an account for your dad or your parents and put those controls on the back end, if they want to get onto Facebook, so that I don't know, there's got to be some kind of burden on these tech companies as the tech advances.
Yeah, I think I agree with Joe's basic point that it isn't the tech per se. I mean, we could say, generative AI is responsible for, people creating child pornography, but we don't want to do away with generative AI. We want to do away with people using it to create child pornography. And but I think Niki, I think I agree with what you're saying, which is that there's got to be more responsibility, I think, by some of the vendors or the developers of the products that are using this technology to ensure some kind of standards, some kind of controls around it. I don't think that's blaming the technology. I think that's a responsibility that falls on the vendors and lots of other people. Like I said, part of this is just family members and others who are close to somebody being able to intervene in some way. But sometimes you don't even know what's going on. And it might comes down to the only solution is to take somebody's phone away from them or give them one of those like old people phones that just has big numbers and no nothing else on it. And that's not always a good option either. So I don't know. It's a difficult issue. All right. Anybody got anything else they want to talk about today? Victor, your son?
Oh, hi.
It's Captain America.
I was just curious if anyone had tried the new ChatGPT search yet. I was playing around with it and I think it's pretty cool.
I haven't.
I have not. I intended to, but I've been busy. I actually just turned in my final draft of my article like seconds before I hopped on this call, so I haven't played with anything yet.
I haven't been super impressed with it. I don't think the results are all that different from the beta version of Search GPT. Maybe I just have only asked some surface questions, so I'm gonna have to play with it some more. But I actually prefer using Chat GPT to get most information. Obviously, there's a date limitations and some other constraints where you're not getting what you need all the time, but I often get better information there that's more useful for whatever I'm trying to accomplish than Search GPT. So, or the search that's built into it at this point. But I think time will tell.
I didn't play around with the beta version, I don't think, so I can't compare the difference. I just actually appreciate them with like the linking to the sources and the whatever. Like I was like, I'm going on vacation and I was like looking up a few things and it like actually gave me really useful websites that I wasn't finding when I was just trying to Google things. So I liked it.
I think Dave Rakowski's comment, try asking it what's wrong with your husband. The other thing I saw that was really cool this week.
It's responsible to be, where do I start?
I know, right?
Nikki's gonna go smack her husband after this, by the way.
Did you see the headline about Claude when they were working with it to, let me see. Claude AI got bored during a coding demonstration and started perusing photos of national parks instead. That's like the third or fourth time I've seen headlines about these AIs that have been tasked with something, and they realize they're also doing some other thing, in parallel that's completely unrelated to it. And it's kind of interesting. It's like they get bored or something. It's really kind of an interesting phenomenon, and I wonder what's behind it.
Yeah.
Well, that never happens with our audience here, I'm pretty sure. So,
You never go off task ever.
should we do a quick P-Doom? What the heck? We haven't done P-Doom for, did we do it? I don't know. Maybe we did it last week. I forget. Uh, who wants to kick it off? Who's feeling doom ready?
Well, I'll go first. I mean, the only reason my PDUM isn't extremely high right now going into next week is because I'm going on vacation tomorrow and I will be in the wilderness of Iceland while all of the crap is going down here. Although by the time I get back, we might not even have an answer who the president is anyway. So I feel like there's plenty of time for me to just park my PDUM and come right back to it. So I'm really only at like 50-50 right now, but that's purely vacation driven.
Yeah, I'd hang in Iceland if I were you.
I know.
Niki, how about you?
I'm gonna give it a PDUM of 50, which for me is kind of on the more reasonable side and less death and destruction. I'm just feeling kind of meh. It's, you know, the days are getting shorter. The weather's finally getting colder, and the holidays aren't here yet. But I don't feel like everything's about to go to hell in a handbasket, so I'm just gonna hang out there in the middle.
All right. Joe, Victor, who wants to go next?
So, okay, all predictions come with your money back guarantee. Like I was saying before the show, I don't think it's going to be close. We might not know who's president by this time next week, but I think numbers are going to be in her favor, and so I'm feeling pretty good about it. So I'm going to go because I think the polls are getting loaded with pro-Republican polls that show Trump ahead when he really isn't. And the fundamentals of the election just don't favor him. So I'm gonna go 30. And of course, obviously, if he wins in a 400 electoral vote majority, I never said this.
Yeah,
Joe.
I'll stick around 30. Yeah, I feel heightened over my usual in the 20s number for the same reasons, but I feel okay. So like more worried than I would otherwise be, but I'm still more
So 250s and 230s. I think we got. I'm gonna have to break the tie and go with the 50s. I guess. I mean, on one hand, it is an 80-degree day on November 1st in Boston, which never happens, and it's sunny and beautiful. But on the other hand, that might mean global warming is happening all that much faster, and the Earth is going to blow up in no time whatsoever. And in a few days, we have an election coming up, and I don't know if there's enough alcohol in all the liquor stores around me to get me through the next those few days. And I'm not sharing Victor's optimism about it. I'm gonna, yeah, I'm right there in the middle, I guess. Who knows? Life could be good, life could be bad, could go either way right now. All right. Well, we will. Maybe we'll all be here. Not Stephanie, but maybe some of us will be here next week to see how it all panned out. Joe, you doing any like CNN appearances or anything in the next few
no
days?
CNN. No CNN next week. It'll be a little tight for me because I'm running an event, but I'm pretty sure I could be here. We'll see. I won't
All
have
right.
good internet. I may not be here next week, but we'll
Yeah.
see.
All
I
right.
mean,
Okay.
No CNN though, as far as I know.
if
Okay.
I decide I'm just staying in Iceland permanently, I'll join you next Friday.
We'll join you. We'll be
Yeah,
over
yeah, you
there.
can send for us.
I'll scout a compound for the legal tech journalists. Okay.
Sounds good.
And I'm looking forward to it.
And he
All
might
right.
try to
Well,
buy he might try to buy Iceland. He tried to buy Greenland, so you never know.
yeah. All right, everybody. Vote, vote, vote. See you all next Friday.
I know.
Bye.